I like to start with what I know and then work towards what I don't know. I wanted to take the formality of the house and the informality of the woods and kind of make the two combine. I'd like to show you how not to mulch around a tree. It's a step that I see very few landscapers doing. You want to make sure to have variation in your heights. Look at how lovely this is. We just cued the butterfly to come in. How you doing today, folks? Today I'm going to be cutting back some perennials in my garden. It's early November and it's time to cut things back. And I figure I'll bring you guys along and kind of show you what I'm doing out here, and maybe you'll, pick up some ideas for your own yard. Usually when I'm cutting back perennials, I'll just bring a pair of pruning shears to cut them back. I've been doing this long enough that, I know there's all kinds of different tools out there, but for most jobs, a pair of pruning shears is all you really need. And then the other thing I do is I do carry my soil knife as well. That way, if I'm down pruning the perennials, I can pop out any dandelions. I'm on a mission to remove the dandelions from my gardens. So whenever I see, that very obvious bloom of dandelion foliage, you just grab your soil knife and pop them out. The other thing I'll do when I'm working in the gardens is I'll put a knee pad on one of my knees. And I'm pretty sure I've done this even when I was younger too, because invariably when you're out working this time of the year, the ground is a little bit wet. So I'll put the knee pad on one knee, that way I won't end up with this wet, cold knee or pants all day. And then I'll usually bring around, today I'm just gonna bring a big green bucket. A big green bucket, I'll just cut them and throw the stuff right into the bucket. And as I finish cutting each individual garden, I'll then go back with a rake and just try to rake up any leaves or sticks that may be around. And again, that's up to you. I did a fairly major cleanup about 5 days ago in my yard. So my goal today is to get the perennials before more leaves fall on there so that the wind can just blow those leaves through the yard. One other thing to consider when you're working in your gardens with perennials is birds will eat the seeds from a lot of flowers. So if you have things like black-eyed Susan, purple coneflower in your garden, even I have some Meadow Rue in the garden, they'll come and eat the seeds out of them. So if you're trying to encourage the birds, or you're just a good person, want to give the birds something to eat, you can hold off on pruning some of your heavily seeded plants until the spring. The rule of thumb I'll use when I'm cutting back perennials, the quick and dirty rule of thumb, is if it's got a basal rosette of leaves, if there's a group of leaves by the ground, or if it's like a ground cover, I'll usually leave it for the winter and just clean it up a little bit in the spring. And then if it's got a stem and a stalk, I'll go ahead and just cut the whole stalk off. If you have any questions about pruning back perennials, I'd recommend this book by Tracy DeSabato Aust. This is, probably the first book you should get, or the second book you should get about perennials. She doesn't have a ton of color pictures in here, so this book will tell you how to maintain perennials, and then maybe you get one other book with lots of pretty pictures to see what they look like. But in the back of the book, she's got, listings of the perennials and how to care for them, and she'll tell you specifically whether you should be, pruning them back in the fall, the spring, what you should be doing. And I have to admit that I'm a little bit rusty, so I did, look up a couple things in this book. But I will put a link in the description of this video, and it's The Well-Tended Perennial Garden by Tracy DeSabato Aust. It's a really wonderful book. This plant right here, this is Tiarella cordifolia, and this is the ones I had to look up because I haven't planted it in a while. I just put this in this year. But it's a slow spreading ground cover. And I looked it up in the book, The Well-Tended Perennial Garden, and they recommend you just leave the plant as it is and then just do any, deadheading or deadleafing in the spring. So we're going to leave that just the way it is. But I do just want to show you for a woodland garden, check out how cool this looks. This is Tiarella cordifolia, Foamflower. Right here we've got some Hosta, and they come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. So there's two ways you can go about, cutting back Hosta. The first one is you can just, grab a group of foliage, be careful not to catch your fingers with your pruners, and cut it back. But I've been doing this for long enough that I usually notice that later in the season, once the foliage starts to die back, it'll get to a point where you can literally just grab the foliage and yank it. Now if I did that and the hosta was coming out of the ground, I'd stop and use my pruners. If you're working in a larger bed, and hosta beds usually tend to be pretty large, just go through there and start grabbing it and ripping it out. And then just, you know, take the foliage and put it right in your bucket or on your tarp. You can clean up a hosta garden pretty quickly. Look at the beautiful fall color on this Oakleaf Hydrangea. It's just coming in, and if you get an Oakleaf Hydrangea in bright sun, it just has this vibrant red color. It's a beautiful plant. This is a Biokovo geranium. It's a ground cover geranium. It's going to spread very quickly and just fill in this whole place. But this is one of the plants that's a ground cover, and what you do with this guy is just let it be, even though it's going to catch some leaves, and then in the spring you can just cut back any bad foliage. Usually the gardens I maintain, if they've got it, this plant is so aggressive and such a fast grower that by the time you get back in the spring, it's already grown through last year's foliage and it looks great. It just forms a very tight mat. I don't remember if it was Mother's Day, maybe my wife's birthday, but we got a Gerbera daisy and we just stuck it in the garden because we didn't know what to do with it. And I think this tells you how mild of a fall we've had so far. We've only really had one, I don't even think I'd call it a heavy frost, but I mean, we definitely had a frost. Gerbera daisies, you know, they don't survive up here in zone 6, so eventually this is going to die to the ground. This is a good reminder to make sure you bring your plants that are affected by frost inside before the frost comes. I just wanted to show you a couple cool plants as we're walking through the garden, and this is called Sweet Box, and I'll put the scientific name up. It's something crazy like Sarcoca. It's a weird name, but it's a beautiful evergreen shrub. I put this here probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a very slow grower, but this is going to give you winter interest, you know, through the year. It doesn't really do much as far as flowers go, but it's just a compact evergreen shrub. Makes a great ground cover, and I don't think I've ever even touched this with pruners. Now, a little bit to the right here, we've got Mia Japonica, which is another one that, Japanese Skimmia, it's another one that doesn't require a lot of maintenance. You know, again, I don't think I've ever touched these with pruners, but I mean, look at the beautiful green color. So while we're cutting back a lot of the perennials, we're still going to have our Japanese Skimmia to give us some interest in the landscape. This plant right here is called Lenten Rose, and it's a really cool plant because it blooms really early in the season. Usually in like late March, early April, you're going to see flowers on this plant, and I've had this plant covered with a few inches of snow because we're still getting snow. It's a very tough foliage as well. So this plant is what's known as semi-evergreen, or it is evergreen, and this foliage will last all winter. What happens for me though is usually if we have a snowy winter, it's covered by snow all winter, which I guess is another good reason to leave the foliage because it'll protect the flowers. But I've kind of gotten in the habit of cutting back the foliage in the fall because by the time the flowers come and the spring comes, it's usually too late and it's just a mess, and it's a real mess to get in there and prune. Now I'm in USDA hardness zone 6, so I can get away with that. If you're in a colder hardness zone, you know, the plant really may need these leaves for protection. Some years are different than others. If I get out to do the pruning, I'll cut them in the fall. If I don't, well, I'll get them in the spring. That's pretty much how my whole garden works. But I'm going to go ahead and cut back the foliage. And whether you're in the fall or the spring, it's the same idea. You would just get in there and cut the plant to the ground. And you can see why it's nice to cut the plant back, because you see all these leaves are getting trapped in there. So once this is gone, it'll be much easier to clean up the gardens. If you look inside the plant, you can see here's next year's flowers. So, you know, if you live in a really cold spot, I wouldn't do this. I probably wouldn't recommend this. This is just me not wanting to get out, you know, when the plant is half covered in snow and cut it back. But you can see the flower buds are already there. So there you go. And you know, I will admit that, you know, all this nice foliage, you know, it is something to see through the window. You know, things can get pretty bleak in the winter. So again, I can kind of go back and forth on this one. Right here, this mess of foliage is a Daylily, and I think this is either Stella de Oro or Happy Returns. And the best thing you can do with Daylilies is just grab the foliage and yank it. If the plant doesn't come up, you're perfectly fine. Done. Now, if I was out a little bit earlier in the season and the foliage was hanging tight, I would just go ahead and grab my pruners, grab a clump of foliage and cut it back. But Daylilies and Hosta, those are the two plants that when I see them, I just grab the foliage and yank it. As long as roots don't come out, you're perfectly fine. Right in front of us here, this is Heuchera, and this is a new one called Paris, which is a rebloomer. It's already bloomed once. I should have had these deadheaded, but it's actually reblooming on this plant here. And you can also see some reblooms there. And it's the first week of November, folks. I mean, that's pretty cool to have some interest in the garden. But with the Heuchera, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna deadhead it and let it be, because all the foliage is coming from the center of this plant, and I don't wanna cut it to the ground and end up cutting off the growth tips, but I'll also wanna give this some protection from the winter. So all I'm gonna do with the Heuchera is go ahead and deadhead it. A very popular one is Pallas Purple. If you've got one of these with purple foliage, that's another one where you just let it be. And Pallas Purple especially, you'll find inside of it, it's got almost like branches growing, and they'll be 3 or 4 inches tall. And if you go in and cut those off, you're going to be losing a lot of foliage, and it may or may not regrow other ones. So in the spring, you're not going to cut this to the ground. You're just going to clean up the leaves very carefully, very gingerly, so you don't damage the plant. This right here is Simisafuga or fairy candles, and these are the leftover blooms. So all I'm going to do is just go through and cut these blooms off at the ground and get rid of them. And then over here, this is some Meadow Rue, which is about 6 feet tall. And same thing, I mean, with something this easy, you just take your pruners, you cut them off at the ground, you're good to go. I don't usually leave tags in my landscapes when I'm planting them, but around my house, if it's a new plant, I usually do leave the tags just to remind myself of what I planted. And this is Epimedium sulphurium. And once it's established, it's supposed to do really well in dry shade. It very slowly spreads, and then in the spring it's got these small, see there's a picture, these very small yellow flowers. But it's a really good plant for dry shade. I am not going to touch this with the pruners. It still looks, you know, green. It looks healthy, and I probably could cut it back, but I'm not gonna. And a lot of times when I'm working in the garden, you know, you just take a deep breath and you say, you know, what makes sense here, and that's what I'm going to do here. At the back of the garden here, we've got some Baptisia. And it's really not too bad to look at. It is evergreen, but I want to clean things up so in the spring when it's time to go, I don't have to come out and fight with this guy. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my pruners, and you know, with these really stalky ones, you know, you just cut them back at the ground. Just cut it all back at the ground, cut it all back at the ground, and we're good to go. Over here we've got Stokesia, Stokes aster. And then we've also got Centaurea montana. And the Centaurea still has some of the stalks left from blooming, but both of these are two of those plants that have that basal rosette, that clumping form to them. So I'm going to just leave them as they are. I'll deadhead, you know, anything that needs to be deadheaded. There's an old flower on the Stokes aster, and we'll just let them be. And then in the spring, if they get knocked back a bit, we can always, you know, cut the foliage back a touch. You just want to be careful you don't go through and clean cut this to the ground. Right in front of us here, we've got some purple coneflower, and this is one of the ones that the birds really love. And you can see, if you take a look at some of the bloom, they've already removed quite a bit of the seeds from them. So, you know, I was going to cut this back, but it just doesn't feel right. Maybe what I'll do is I'll leave this big one in the middle here, and we'll cut back the two on the sides. and let the birds have a little food. And with our black-eyed Susan, we're not going to cut down all the foliage, but we're basically going to just focus on cutting the flower stalks off. Pull a couple weeds over here. And you can see all these leaves are just getting caught up in that. The worm action there. Always get happy when I see worms. Means you got good soil. I guess I am going to cut a bit of the foliage too. Purple coneflower, you can't kill it. So we just whacked it back, and in the spring it'll come growing, and while there's some stubs and it looks a little bit ratty now, once it grows back, it's going to look gorgeous in the spring. Around these stepping stones, I've got some chocolate chip ajuga, and it's probably been here 12, 15 years if I had to guess. We're not going to do anything to cut it back. In the spring, if we need to, we can always remove some of the dead foliage. I don't think there's going to be much to cut. Usually you just kind of grab it and rub your hands along it and pick out the foliage. But I think it's a pretty cool ground cover. It's doing a nice job filling the space in. And then it's got like a bluish purple flower in the spring. Right here we've got some little Princess Spirea, which you'll see in the opening of my gardening videos. And I mean, nobody really talks about the fall color of Spirea, but I think that's a really amazing fall color. I mean, this part of the yard is just absolutely gorgeous when you come around and see that color. We're not going to do anything with the Spirea. I have a video I'll put below this video where I explain that what I'll do is I'll wait till late winter and just go ahead and cut the whole plant back. And I think these guys are due. This is a grouping of Astilbe. I'm not sure the cultivar. And inside the grouping of Astilbe, we've got some bittersweet growing, which is an invasive plant in Connecticut. Get that out of there. But Astilbe is a plant that, you know, it's one of the easy ones. You just cut everything back to the ground. Try not to cut your fingers. And then this way all these leaves can just keep moving. Right here what we're looking at is Penstemon Digitalis. And if you take a look, you can see that the leaves at the bottom here are actually still green and look great. And what you're looking at here is the flower stalks. And this flowered like back in June. So I really should have come out and deadheaded these flowers back in June. But this is one of those plants where it's got the leaves at the base. So all we're gonna do is cut the flowers out and leave all the leaves at the base. And again, this is gonna save us work next year to have to cut this stuff back. But in the short term, when I clean my leaves up, they'll just blow right through this. Here we've got some more daylilies, and again, these are either Happy Returns or Stella de Oro. And it's just, you just walk up to them and start pulling. If stuff comes out of the ground, stop. Daylilies, they don't mind a little abuse. And you just cut back one. Two. And there's three. They really go that quickly. Again, if it starts to come out of the ground, stop, use your pruners. While we're here, I just want to show you this tree really quick. We bought our house in 2000, and it's 2017, so we closed on the house, I think it was in October. So we've been in this house for 17 years. So I don't think the first year we were in the house, but maybe within the first 2 or 3 years, I planted this dawn redwood. And I love dawn redwoods. It's one of my favorite trees, which I don't use in landscapes much because it's a pretty quick grower. But look at the branch pattern in this tree. It's just a beautiful climbing tree. You know, if you've got young children and you ever want to give somebody a tree, or if somebody you know has a baby, just give them a seedling of this and tell them to plant it well away from the house. and your kids will be able to, their kids will be able to, or your kids will be able to climb the tree. But look how fast this tree grows. I mean, that's gotta be about 24 inches in diameter at the base. I mean, that's huge. And when I planted this tree, it was like a 5 to 6 foot tall tree. And it has just blossomed into this absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous tree. And the reason that I put this tree here, and I know that I did it fairly quickly, was because this window right here, that's our bathroom upstairs, and then that's our master bedroom. And I didn't want to be sitting in that window, and we live on a busy road, and looking at the busy road. So I literally, you know, I would stand in those windows and stare out the windows and try to figure out just the right spot to put this tree. And it was funny, I was looking out the window a month or two ago and I was like, you got it. This is a plant called Allium glaucum, and a friend of mine gave these probably 6 or 8 years ago. He usually tries new plants, and this is one of his go-to perennials for his landscapes, because it literally is just this low-growing mound of foliage, and then in the late summer it's got these blooms, these little purple blooms, and it's an allium, so you know the deer don't seem to eat it or give it trouble. And I really should prune them back. You know, one of the ways you know when things need to be pruned back is you'll see a dead space in the center. So maybe next year somebody's going to get some Allium glaucum in their landscape, and I can just divide these plants like in 4 or 5 or 6 and just leave one piece and put them in someone's landscape. We're not going to go through and just cut everything back to the ground. We're just going to take our pruners and deadhead the flowers. And again, you know, my gardener has been a little bit off this year, I guess, and hasn't been doing the deadheading, but that's all we need to do for this guy. This plant right here, this is called Barren Strawberry or Waldistinia, and we're not going to do any cutting back on it, but it's a very slow growing ground cover. Again, we're in the first week of November. It looks gorgeous. Yeah, it does catch some leaves, but if you're looking for a more natural ground cover in a woodland setting, or you're just sick of Pachysandra and Vinca, you know, give Waldistinia a try. Really nice plant. Right here we've got a sedum, and the way sedums grow is they have what are called buttons, little buttons at the base of the plant, and the buttons are going to be there right now. So if your sedum look nice, you could certainly leave them longer. Again, it's early November, I'm ready to move on, so we're just going to go through and, you know, cut off all these stalks as low as we can get them. And that is going to expose our buttons. And this is another one that I like to do it in the fall, because once we get a heavy snow, you know, some heavier freezes, these plants, they just start to look a little bit messy. It's much more enjoyable to prune things back now. They're kind of covered right now, but if you look in here, you gotta dig down a little bit. You'll just see little buds, and that's all next year's growth that's gonna come through. This is my Stewartia pseudocamellia, just coming into fall color. My sugar maples have already dropped all their leaves, but this guy is just in peak color. And you get the sun on that guy, and it really lights it up. And then a couple weeks ago, you know, I noticed the bark was peeling. This is what's known as exfoliating bark. And I just think that's cool. Really love Stewartia pseudocamellia. What I've been doing in this garden is every spring when I go through and weed it, you know, there's usually some seedlings under here, and I'll just take my seedlings and kind of push them away from the tree and other plants and just let them grow for a while. And at some point I really need to bring these seedlings and start lining them out. But check out the fall color on this one. Now I don't know if this one has this really fluorescent fall color because it's stressed out or because there's just something different about it. But if that fall color looks that good next year, I could be on to something, and I could probably have new cultivar of Stewartia pseudocamellia called, I don't know, John's Embers, Burning Embers, because that really is twice as bright as anything else we've got around here. This shrub right here, this is Vitex agnus castus, or the chaste tree, and this is not, the foliage is not hardy in zone 6 where we are. This one came with the house. I think the people before us were trying to do some kind of historical landscape. So, you know, when I first moved here, I'd leave the tree, and every year, you know, all the sticks would be dead, the branches would be dead. So what I do is I'll actually just go through with my my chaste tree, and I'll just cut everything back to the ground, actually usually about 6 inches to a foot from the ground, and in the spring it'll come back. And I usually do this in the fall again, because otherwise, you know, this is just going to be a mess of branches, and it's so close to the driveway it starts scratching cars. I made a video last year, and I think it was early December, where I just kind of threw together this garden here. And I just want to let everybody know that, you know, the garden's working out great. The Hartledge wine Calycanthus grows significantly faster than I thought, and next year I'll probably end up transplanting it somewhere else in the yard. And then we've got the Montauk Daisies in the front here. But if anybody ever wonders whatever happened with this planting, she's doing great. It's funny, my wife, you know, says that she doesn't like the overgrown look in front of the house, and I have to agree. You know, overgrown houses blocking windows is never a good thing. But something about large shrubs, you know, when I see my customers with these overgrown rhododendrons and yews, I don't like that look. But the overgrown look here, I kind of like. I mean, I wish it was a little farther from the house. And this side of the house, you know, the plants are well away from the windows, but I really like, you know, these boxwood. That's Newport blue boxwood. That's some large Fothergilla. There's something I kind of like about the fullness of this, and it could possibly be that, again, we live on a busy road, so I'd rather see the back of shrubs, you know, than the headlights of a Kentworth. But I like maintained fullness, not just, you know, if all these shrubs were hit with a hedge clipper and just made into boxes and balls, I wouldn't like it. But I really do enjoy, look at that Stewartia again, I really do enjoy the fullness of this part of the house. We've got some Montauk Daisies here, and Montauk Daisies are semi-evergreen. The foliage does persist through the winter, and they also flower, you know, very late in the fall. But Montauk Daisies are funny because, you know, while they used to be a type of chrysanthemum, they changed the names of things, so I don't even know what they call them anymore. Chrysanthemums you just cut to the ground, but a Montauk Daisy, you don't want to cut to the ground because it's not good for the plant. If you take a look at the stems, you can actually see next year's buds for next year's growth on them. So what I usually do with Montauk Daisies is I'll just cut back the stems maybe halfway. I just want to kind of encourage them to be a little bit more bushy. So if you take a look, you can kind of see all the little green dots on the stems. So all these little green dots are next year's growth. If we left these stems really long, we would just have a mess of foliage. And now we've got things a little bit better under control. So again, the leaves will blow through it. But in the spring, when this starts to flush out, it's not going to be growing into the previous season's growth. This is a different sedum. This is one which I believe is called Vera Jameson. It's not quite as upright. It kind of spreads. But the idea is just the same. You just come through and just go ahead and cut off all your foliage. You know, and as I'm doing this, I'm remembering like in the 90s, sedums and ornamental grasses were really big, and people would plant groupings of sedums. I would plant groupings of sedum and ornamental grasses with the idea to leave them for winter interest. But I gotta say, after watching Pennisedum, Hamlin or Hameln, And sedum autumn joy groupings, yeah, they look great in the fall, but by about mid-December, they just look ratty. The first snow knocks them down. So I pretty much stopped doing dwarf fountain grass in my landscapes because it's a high maintenance plant in my book. But also with sedums, again, you know, it's November, I just cut them back. They do look nice over the winter, but they only look nice for the first part of the winter. By midwinter, they just make winter look even more dreary. Well, folks, that's going to do it for today. And I really did think this was going to be a video about cutting back perennials, but it's just a really calm, peaceful Sunday morning. The overcast skies, and I just was having a nice time kind of reminiscing about the garden. So hopefully you got something out of that, or maybe you just enjoyed. Some people say they enjoy listening to me ramble. Thanks a lot for watching, folks, and we will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.